Welcome to the Adoption and Foster Care Journey, a podcast to encourage, educate, and equip you to care for children and youth through adoption, foster, and kinship care. Hosted by an adoptive mom with over 22 years of kinship and adoptive parenting experience. She's on this journey with you. Please welcome Sandra Flach.
But you are a chosen race, a royal priesthood, a holy nation, a people for his own possession, that you may proclaim the excellencies of him who called you out of darkness and into his marvelous light. That is 1 Peter chapter 2, verse 9. I'm your host, Sandra Flach. Welcome to this episode of the Adoption and Foster Care Journey, where it is my honor to serve you. I'm a mom, an adoptive mom as well, a mom of 8, 5 through adoption, including 2 now young adult sons who were both diagnosed with fetal alcohol syndrome when they were little. So I understand the unique challenges that come from raising children with trauma histories and prenatal substance exposure. And I just really pray that this podcast will become an invaluable resource for your parenting journey. Speaking of resources, my devotional book, Soul Care Saturday, 52 Devotions for Foster and Adoptive Moms, is getting closer to releasing at the end of this month, November. So stay tuned to this podcast, to our website, to our socials to find out when it will be officially available. We will, of course, be announcing that and celebrating that. And be sure to check out our website, which is where all of our adoption and foster care resources are found. Justice for Orphans, ny.org is our parent organization. And on that website, when you go to our homepage, and you will see the beautiful big button that says Adoption and Foster Care Journey, AFCJ. You can click on that, and that will bring you to all of our resources, our FASD support group, our FASD training and coaching, this podcast, our bonus episodes with Dr. Jared Brown, my blog. So all of those things are there for you. So I hope that you will check them out. And of course, follow us on social media at our Adoption and Foster Care Journey pages. And of course, as always, I love to connect with you in person. And while my 2025 speaking calendar is winding down, I just have a few more local to me FASD trainings that I will be doing. I am starting to book for 2026. So I will be at the Filled Retreat January 30th through February 1st, 2026 in Lancaster, Pennsylvania. There is a link already in the show notes about that conference. I'm going to be leading a breakout session on FASD, and I understand that this conference sells out rather quickly. So chances are it's already full, but if you are interested in that conference, there is a link in the show notes that will take you to the Filled website. And then following that on February 21st, I will be at the church at Brook Hills in Birmingham, Alabama, where I will be doing a day-long FASD training there for foster and adoptive families. And in March, I think it might be March 21st, it's a Saturday, I will be at Mobilize, Ohio, at North Canton Chapel, where I will be leading, I believe, 3 breakout sessions, a couple on FASD and one on soul care. So if you're interested in having me speak for your group, whether it be online or in person, you want some FASD training, or it's a foster adoptive mom retreat, or parent retreat, contact me. My email is in the show notes below, so that you can reach out and schedule me for any of those things. And hope to see you as I am out and about. I also do schedule online trainings for groups as well. So check it out in the show notes. Now, today we are observing National Adoption Month. It is November, and our guest today is Justin Myers. Justin grew up in Arkansas, but has lived in China, Kentucky, and Tennessee over the years. Justin has many passions: the local church, international missions, refugees, but is most excited about investing his working hours in others navigating adoption as the director of programs at Show Hope, an organization committed to caring for orphans by engaging the church and reducing barriers to adoption. He and his wife Bonnie are the adoptive parents of two teenagers, Hosanna and Asher. Justin has master's degrees in missions and business administration, which he has used in retail, church, and nonprofit settings. Justin also holds a TBRI practitioner designation, which he is seeking to utilize in all his personal and work relationships. Justin and his family currently live in Nashville, Tennessee. Please welcome Justin Myers. Hey, Justin, welcome to the show.
Hey, Sandra, it's great to be here.
I'm excited to have you. We recently met in person at the Replanted conference in Chicago. So I'm excited to hear more of your story and for our listeners to get to know you as well. So let's start off with your family's adoption story, starting with you and Bonnie. What led you to pursue adoption?
Yeah, well, thank you. Yeah, really excited to share about my family. They are precious to me, and so um, yeah, Bonnie and I we're nearing 19 years of marriage. And so when we married, we wanted to have children, and we're really seeking the Lord in that. And actually, we went through a season where we were not able to have children biologically. And so we were just really seeking God's wisdom, the wisdom of others around us, because obviously parenting comes in a lot of different forms. And so really trying to figure out what did that look like for us. And we were actually in our church in Louisville, and the pastor was preaching through the book of Acts, and he came to Acts 8:1, and that's where persecution hits the church, and the disciples are scattered. And I remember our pastor at that time saying, it took Acts 8:1 to fulfill God's promise in Acts 1:8, which, if you remember in Acts 1:8, is where he said it's going to go from Jerusalem to Samaria to the ends of the earth, right? And the way that that happened was through persecution. And so he did not say this in the sermon, but we were really wrestling through that season and actually just saw purpose in our infertility journey. And God was beginning to open our eyes to see children who needed families. And we may or may not have been open to that had we had children biologically, naturally. And so we were also had just a large community of other adoptive families around us. And so we saw it in living color. And so we were really encouraged to step into that. We adopted our children from Ethiopia nearly 14 years ago now. They're 14 and 15. And we looked at a lot of different places. And as you know, especially in international adoption, there are a long list of requirements for adoptive parents before you can even enter into a program. And we finally settled on Ethiopia. And the reason is we read a book called "There Is No Me Without You," and it was the story of the spread of AIDS and the connection to just the orphan crisis across Ethiopia, and how one woman who had been widowed started inviting children into her home that needed families. And eventually she started an organization just because there was incredible need. And so that just really endeared our heart to Ethiopia in particular. And then started to getting to know Ethiopian nationals that lived around us where we were at in that season. And so started loving the country, started loving the people, and then just really, Lord, if you want us to adopt children from Ethiopia, then we're ready for that. And here we are, 14 years later. So,
I love that. And it's interesting how the Lord does direct each family to exactly where he would have us to adopt, right? Or he knows the children he wants to place in our family. and he has to lead us to where they are. So I know for my family, we did also an international adoption and felt called very strongly to Ukraine.
Mm,
The church that we were in at that time, the pastor and his wife, their adult daughter was a missionary with YWAM in Kiev, Ukraine, and our church would do periodic mission trips over there. And I got to go on a missions trip, and my heart was already stirred toward adoption, but that trip sealed the deal. I knew it was Ukraine, and I would never. I mean, obviously now there's not adoption really, I don't believe happening there with the war and everything. But even at that time, Ukrainian adoption was so risky and so hard and crazy that I would never have recommended anybody adopt from there. However, I know a lot of people who have, and the Lord leads. So I love those stories of kind of how the Lord got us on that path. So tell us about bringing your kids home. Did they come home together? Hosanna and Asher, right? Did you adopt them at the same
yeah.
time? Separate adoptions? Tell us about that.
So we were in a program in which you could adopt two children who were not um, they were not biological siblings, but we could bring them home at the same time. And so we thought if we're going to enter into this process, we want to welcome home more than one child. And so we did enter into that process. It is very, very, very different now, the wait times. But and when we were waiting, we were told it would be about 9 months, and it ended up being about 2 years. And we thought that was a long time, but we talked to families in international programs now, and 2 years seems fast for a lot of programs. But we uh, really went through a roller coaster in the waiting period, and there was a lot of actions in Ethiopia in the adoption program that were really concerning, and so we weren't even sure if we were going to bring our children home, but God made a way, and He helped us. I will say to do it with integrity and confidence in the process all the way to the end and just really thankful for what the Lord taught us in that season in trusting Him.
Yeah, it's definitely a walk of faith because we similar. I mean, I think everybody has their international adoption story, especially, and we went through the whole paperwork process, got approved, and then at the time in Ukraine, you had to wait for Ukraine to invite you to come, and we got approved probably early fall, and then we're told, well, they're not giving out any more appointments until the beginning of the next year, which would be January. So we figured, well, we'll wait and we'll just be going to Ukraine in the winter. We'll go buy coats, right? But we Ukraine ended up closing its adoption program to reorganize it with a promise that one day when we reopen it, we'll pick up with where we left off with all of the registration numbers, right? Like take a number, stand in line kind of thing.
Hmm.
No promise how long that would take, and that wait actually turned out to be 9 months as well. So we actually didn't travel until October. So we waited all that time. So it was like 10 months actually. But it's very interesting how those things that it just grows our faith, this journey that we're on to our kids, not to mention when they come home. Uh, so very similar. And is Ethiopia still open for adoption? I don't believe Ukraine is, but
So not international adoption. That closed in 2017, I think officially is when that closed to international adoption. But I've been able to travel back to the country a few times since then, just investing in ministry leaders and different communities there. And also we're just staying close to the work that's happening within the country to serve vulnerable children, and just really encouraged how the church is rising up and caring well for these children.
love that. We'll get to more of your work shortly, but I want to learn more about your family and your kids. So how old were your kids when they came home from Ethiopia, and what was that adjustment like?
So when they officially came home, and I say officially because at the very end of our process, um, my wife Bonnie, she went ahead and went and thought, we're going to finish up the paperwork, and as soon as they're ready to issue the visas, then Justin can come, and then we'll fly home together with our kids. Um, she thought she was going to be there for 2 weeks, and she ended ended up being there for 10 weeks. Had to find longer term living arrangements, and there was paperwork problems. The court was, not real favorable to seeing us quickly. And there were other families that were in that process as well. So I say that to say she actually brought the kids with her into a house where there were adoptive parents and had them for nearly that whole 10 weeks. So they were starting to bond with her. And then I came twice, 1 week at a time, because I was working. And then so we brought our children home on our son's first birthday, and then our daughter was 17 months old. So they're 5 months apart.
Wow. So they were little.
Yeah.
So, so nice. So what was that adjustment like? Because we know, of course, there's loss, there's trauma, all of that. Were you prepared for any of that? Just share a little bit about what that was like.
Yeah, so our adoption agency had, educational requirements, and again, it's very different now than it was then. You know better, you do better. I think that definitely applies here. Um, we were handed the book, The Connected Child, right, to prepare for our children coming home, and I'm pretty sure Bonnie read it right away, and then I asked her to give me the Cliff Notes. And I did not read the book until many years later, and I am willing to admit that I was a little bit slower on that. But when we brought our children home, I there was definitely a mismatch of expectations and reality. So we had done a ton of work. Our community had done a ton of work to bring these children home. So I think you can understand there's this outsized expectation that, okay, all the hard work is done.
Mhm.
We're going to bring them in, we're going to plant them in our family, and then we're all just going to flourish together. We're going to pour into these kids. We're going to love them, provide for them, and we're going to do everything that we're supposed to do as parents. We're going to be the best parents that we can be, and everything will be fine. Aside from just the normal hiccups, right, of raising children, and very quickly realized no, our children have unique needs. Even as a 12-month-old and a 17-month-old, there was sickness when they came home. There was developmental delays. There was just a range of challenges that they were facing that then became family challenges, right? Because obviously they can't address those challenges themselves. So now Bonnie and I are taking that on and having to learn how to care for those needs in real time.
Yeah, I love that your wife got the connected child. I know I always say we kind of snuck in, or the Lord snuck us in the back door. We initially we had three biological children, and then we took in a relative child. So we did what we now know as a kinship placement. Didn't know anything about trauma, didn't know anything about anything. Because she came to us, she was a relative, so we didn't even read a book about anything. And it was hard, it was
Mm,
difficult. And then eventually the Lord led us to adopt from Ukraine. And then we brought home three siblings, which, crazy and all that stuff. I call it blessed chaos. But then we went back for the fourth one, the youngest sibling. And the second we met him, we knew we did not have the skills, right? We did not have what it took. We knew he needed help, and we knew we were going to need help to help him. And then once we got him home, that's when I stumbled upon the connected child, and I was like, oh my gosh, this is exactly what's going on. And then I ordered DVDs back then, Dr. Purvis
yeah.
DVDs from TCU, which my husband didn't read the book, but he watched the DVDs with me. And then we actually flew from New York to Nashville for an Empowered to Connect conference when Dr. Purvis herself was still alive and was teaching
Hmm.
those, and just like soaked up everything in a weekend that she had, that she was teaching. And we were hooked on, TBRI, and applied it. And it was so, so helpful. But we went in not knowing anything about trauma or anything, and kind of had to learn the hard way, and thankful for those resources that we eventually did find.
Yeah. We did not know any of that. I didn't know TBRI was a thing. And I think you default to your parenting style is the way that you were raised. Um, and that's certainly what I did. And I will also say I had a very tumultuous childhood, and my parents were divorced when I was in sixth grade. And so there was uh, I had to take my cues from other men in my life, which thankfully God provided some really incredible disciplers and mentors in my life. But there were certainly gaps there that I just had to fill in the best that I knew how, and um, it doesn't always end up well. You know, there's a lot of trial and error, and unfortunately, our kids take the brunt of that as we learn to parent.
Oh, absolutely. Because we were doing the same thing. We were parenting our kids traditionally with the way we parented our bios. Didn't work very well. And then when we found the connected child, that was a huge game changer. And starting to apply those things, we went on to become empowered to connect parent trainers for a season as well. And then when we ended up getting some training because our two youngest boys out of the four kids we adopted from Ukraine were both diagnosed with fetal alcohol syndrome, and then that was another level of hard that we weren't expecting, and so over the years getting that extra training and understanding the impact of prenatal exposure. So did you encounter any of that? I don't know how prevalent that would be from Ethiopia. It's certainly prevalent in Eastern Europe, but it's also prevalent in the United States, FASD.
Yeah. So, you know, family history is, I think, really important to being able to definitively determine if your child has FASD, and we did not have that. So obviously, we brought home children from two different families, and so the amount of knowledge that we have for one child is different from the other. And so we certainly saw symptoms of like sensory deprivation and those developmental delays, like I was talking about, and um, just ways of interacting with the environment that um, was very. It just seemed strange. I'll say that. Just not expected. Like touching the grass outside and flinching back and not wanting to be in the grass, right? That was a really simple thing of, wow, you are feeling the world around you in a very different way than I do, and I need to learn why.
Wow. Yeah, it's definitely, we didn't know anything about trauma either. And it wasn't until our youngest came home and we began learning about the impacts of trauma and we, learning those TBRI principles. And then my eyes were open to understand that, oh my goodness, that first child we brought in through the kinship, through the kinship adoption, she had trauma and we didn't see it through that lens. Her mom had died of cancer. Um, Birth dad was never really in the family. She was being raised by an elderly grandmother who had mental health issues as well as physical issues. But we didn't like, we knew she'd lost her mom and we did get her some counseling for that initially, but we didn't know all of the trauma she had endured until years later it came out because she didn't come to us until she was 8. So there was definitely stuff that we
Mm.
didn't know about. So just then recognizing, oh my goodness, we set all of these expectations on this kid because she looked like our kids, and who would have thought that, there was this difference. And so she could never really meet those expectations, but then it looked like defiance or disobedience or rebellion. And then we're issuing all these consequences, which never worked, never really understanding what was going on. So, when we began to look back and realized, oh my goodness, we need a big redo. We need a do-over here. And she gave us much grace because she was an older teen by the time we realized some of this. So, it is definitely a journey, and we've seen, how TBRI definitely has a positive effect. So I know now you are a TBRI practitioner. Um, when did that come about? Obviously, I'm guessing that it was along your journey. So tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, so I'll kind of come back to where I was introduced to TBRI. So and even show hope really. So I know Um, we'll get to that here in just a little bit. But when we were in our adoption process, we applied for a grant from Show Hope, an adoption aid grant. So that would have been in 2011, 2010, 2011. So definitely knew that Show Hope existed, knew that, certain resources were out there. Um, but really, life was busy. And so didn't look back, after we brought our kids home, we're looking to our church community, looking to maybe just the typical parenting books, and not realizing there was a whole different pathway of resources, honestly, that take children from traumatic backgrounds into account in the parenting style. So, parenting, and I would say I very much bought into the um, obey right away, without delay, with a thankful heart or a joyful heart, however it goes, right? And so that was how I parented, very authoritarian. And um, my kids are going to learn how to respect me and to obey, and in that they'll flourish, right? Because they're going to honor these boundaries, which are put in place for their safety. I mean, just all this language that all of us know. And um, it did not work. Actually made things worse. And I can even say, we did spank our children for a season. I know there are lots of opinions out there about spanking children, and so I'm not making a judgment on that in particular. But I will say, with our kids, um, there are certain parenting models where you spank your children and then you invite them back in, right? And then we're reconciling and we're moving on. Whenever we spanked our children, had it had a very destructive impact on our relationship. And talk about trying to connect with our children, build trust. It did the exact opposite. And no matter of explanation or repetition with it made it better. And so that, that's what parenting looked like. But, let's just try harder. And I was actually on staff at a church here in Nashville, and um, I was helping us to develop a foster care and adoption ministry, in part because our family needed it, but then we also knew the other families in the church that were in that space, and so let's put more intentional support in place. Um, and obviously, Show Hope is down the road, and so there was a staff person at Show Hope that was also a friend and a fellow church member, and he said, I think we should host Hope for the Journey, which is Empowered to Connect, became Hope for the Journey, complete digitally. And let's host it at the church for foster and adoptive families. Um, and I thought, great, okay, sure, we need more resources and would love to do that. And really didn't know anything about it other than he told me, it's built for families in foster care and adoption. And so we hosted it over 2 Saturdays. We did one Saturday, we're going to do half the sessions, take a break the next Saturday, and then 2 weeks later, we were going to do the last half. And we watched through the first half, and I was the one hosting it for our church. And I think I probably wrote more notes than anybody else. I was just drinking it in and had never heard of TBRI. And as I'm hearing it, I just I'm weeping and I'm thinking, why did I not know? Right? And honestly feeling regret of now I can see all these different ways I could have approached my children in the past, and I've lost time,
Yeah.
right? You don't get those moments back. Um, but there's also hope, right?
Yes.
And so now that I have this tool and now that I have this perspective, how am I going to change the way that I approach my children? And in God's providence, because only He knows how to orchestrate this, we did that first Saturday, and then immediately the next week, we had a really traumatic situation within our family, and and one of our children instigated it. And just with those few hours of training and starting to change my perspective and hearing that what's the need behind the behavior mantra in TBRI, whereas I would have come down very, very hard in a situation like this because it was destructive, there was long-term consequences coming out of this situation. It really helped me to stop and to not respond immediately and to just gently walk with that child and with our family through that situation and not expecting resolution right away, but walking with and saying, I'm here with you. I'm not going away, no matter how terrible this was. And it just drastically, I couldn't believe I was responding that way. Um, and my child really opened up to me in that.
Mhm.
And and so I don't even think we went to the next Saturday because we were having to resolve, consequences out of this, but eventually, watch the sessions later. But that was my introduction to TBRI. And Bonnie was also, learning about it. And so actually, when I came on staff at Show Hope a little bit later, then I had an opportunity to become a TBRI practitioner in my role. And so that was 3 years ago. So been a practitioner for 3 years and continuing to learn, continuing to apply and use it, not just in my parenting relationships, but honestly in all of my relationships.
Yeah, I love that. So for our listeners who might not know what TBRI is, can you just kind of give us the elevator pitch on what that is?
Yeah, so TBRI stands for Trust-Based Relational Intervention, and it's a care model that was developed by doctors Karen Purvis and David Cross at TCU, which is Texas Christian University in Dallas. It was developed in the early 2000s, and it really started observationally with the way that Dr. Purvis approached children. And it takes into account the way that early relational trauma and separation impacts a child's development. So we think about how it impacts their brain and their bodies and their biology and their beliefs. And there's a fifth one I always forget. But it impacts the whole child. And um, and it sets them on a course in which they approach life and relationships as a threat and as a liability, and they have an outsized um, reaction to the environment around them, and they're kind of stuck in those traumatic experiences. Um, and so TBRI both helps caregivers to understand, right, and to develop compassion for children that have experienced that, and to start looking at their behaviors and their challenges through a different lens. And then gives them tools. So there's connecting principles, empowering principles, and correcting principles that then say, okay, since we know this about this child, and by the way, let's look at our own histories and understand this is why we approach parenting or caregiving the way that we do. Now, here's some really practical tools um, to do three things: to provide felt safety for the child, um, to provide connection, and then to help them grow. We call it regulation. So when they're facing really stressful situations, what are tools that we can give them to help them face those situations?
Yeah, I love that. And thank you for explaining that because I know you and I know what it is, and I know many of our listeners do as well, but there are folks out there who perhaps don't. And it's really important. And I highly recommend the Connected Child book by Dr. Purvis and Dr. David Cross. There's also the Connected, is it the Connected
Parent.
Parent? Thank you, with Lisa
Mm.
Qualls, who I know and love. And just great resources. And now, and then Hope for the Journey now is what Empower to Connect was, those conferences that I used to go to, and that you can do the simulcast, which we had done over the years as well. Such great training for foster and adoptive parents. And it was certainly a game changer for our family, even just understanding the impact of fear on a child and them needing to feel safe, even though we know they're safe because we're keeping them safe. They don't know that they're safe. And gosh, that was, especially our youngest was driven by so much of that fear. And it took us a long time to build trust, right? To disarm fear and build trust. So it's incredible training, and we highly, highly recommend it. And we'll talk more about Show Hope shortly, but I, greatly appreciate that that you are a trainer in that as well, because that's incredible. So I just want to follow up with your kiddos. How old are your kids now, and how are they doing?
Yeah, so our daughter is 15 and our son is 14. Again, they're 5 months apart, so our son will shortly be 15. And they are teenagers through and through.
Yeah.
So I've just entered high school this year. Um, and when I reflect on, you know, their time in school in particular, we're in a far different place now than we were then. And I say that to say that there's still challenges now, especially some educational challenges that require a lot of support. But in terms of being able to engage in school and in relationships, it we're in a far healthier place than we have been in years past. And so I'm just really, really encouraged where we're at now.
Sandra Flach, host of the Adoption and Foster Care Journey podcast, and FASD educator Debbie Raymond, invite you to join Hope for the FASD Journey, a virtual support community for parents and caregivers raising individuals with fetal alcohol spectrum disorder, diagnosed or not. This faith-based support community meets online 3 times each month, features special VIP guests, and a private Facebook group for members only, which includes Soul Care Saturday video devotionals led by Sandra and Deb. Both Sandra and Deb are adoptive moms raising kids with FASD and facilitators of the Facets Neurobehavioral Model. For details and to register, visit justicefororphansny.org/hope-community. That's justicefororphansny.org/hope-community.
So I'm so glad to hear that you guys are in a better place. I know it's always a journey, right? Having teenagers is just another another part of the adventure, for sure. Raised several of those. Our youngest is now 20, but it goes on. So I'm grateful to hear that. What Justin, what surprised you? I guess I would ask about, you adopt kids, we're raising these kids. What about the adoption journey has surprised you?
Hmm, that's a good question. I think I would say how the difference between how prepared I thought I was and how prepared I actually was.
Yeah.
Um, and I think so that's one piece. And so I've been catching up, been trying to catch up. And so I think I have to be gentle and kind to myself, and then just really appreciate that my family is as well, that we're just all on this journey together. And I think I was also surprised um, at just the local church's understanding of how to care for um, families that bring in children from really difficult backgrounds. And some churches are doing it really well, and some churches they don't know what they don't know. Um, and we've experienced a range of those, that have had either really negative effects on us or really positive effects on us. Um, and then I think maybe the third thing is I didn't realize how much adoption would impact my own understanding of me
Yeah.
and my own journey of dealing with things that were unresolved from my own past.
Yeah.
Mm.
can relate to all of those things that you said, because I'm a child of divorce as well. So when it came time to take that attachment style survey that we get, it's like, oh, that's interesting. And then being able to understand really some of my parenting being affected by that, right? So it was very eye-opening, that way. So there's a lot of things that are that totally resonate with, with me, with what you said. You picked the verse out that I opened the show with, which was 1 Peter 2:9. I'll just read it again to refresh everybody's memory. But you are a chosen race, a royal priesthood, a holy nation, a people for his own possession, that you may proclaim the excellencies of him who called you out of darkness into his marvelous light. Justin, why did you choose that verse? What does that mean to you?
I so there's two things. This is a verse that's been really important to our family as a whole for the past 20 years. Um, and that first part is about our identity, right? It's about when God looks at us, who does he see? And what is the purpose that he's placed on us? And he has elevated us to the highest level alongside him. And that for me, I need that reminder often because I am my own worst critic. I don't think I deserve God's love, which I don't, of course, but he lavishes that on us, right? And he wants us. We have belonging with him. So there's that first piece that we belong with him. And then proclaim the excellencies of him who called you out of darkness into his marvelous light is we Christians have a testimony, and we are meant to share it. It's meant to be said out loud to others, and so that has very much impacted the ministry that both my wife and I have had over the past 20 plus years. We're really drawn to people who are in vulnerable circumstances, whether that's been living overseas and doing mission work, or it's ministering to and befriending refugees in our city, or the homeless, or children in vulnerable circumstances. God has just really given us a heart to proclaim His goodness to them.
I love that. I love that. Thank you for sharing it. I do want to talk about your work with Show Hope. You are the director of programs at Show Hope, which is an organization committed to caring for orphans by engaging the church and reducing barriers to adoption. You mentioned your family received an adoption grant. So tell us about the work of Show Hope and your role.
Yeah. Well, I just recently celebrated 4 years at Show Hope, and this is a wonderful season. I love this organization, and part of what I love about it, the two things that I often say is we have a meaningful mission, so it's worth getting up in the morning and coming to work and doing this. It matters, and then I would say we have a healthy work culture, so. We have a staff that really love each other and support each other, and just step into the work every day together as a team. So, primarily, our work hits four different areas, and you said reducing barriers to adoption, and so that's how we frame our programs. We say financial, medical, and educational or knowledge barriers to adoption. So in 2003, when the Chapmans started Show Hope, the most immediate need was people needed help fundraising because adoption is expensive. It was expensive over 20 years ago. It's more expensive now, actually. And so let's just give adoption aid grants. And so that has been a cornerstone program for us for the past 22 years now. And through that program, we've been able to help welcome over 95 children home to a loving and secure family, and just continuing strong in that. Still love serving families both in domestic adoption and international adoption. But entering into that, and you know this, when you then have proximity to a family, you begin to see other needs, maybe other needs that weren't as obvious. And so that's where pre and post adoption support is one of our big programs. And what's primarily under that is the Hope for the Journey resource. which for over 15 years, it started as the Empower to Connect conference. That's in partnership with the Karen Purvis Institute at TCU and also our friends Empower to Connect in Memphis. And then in 2021, it became a fully digital resource. So there's no in-person event, but the content is still there, still have high quality training from trainers at KBICD, as well as other uh, content that goes along with that. So there's teaching sessions and then what we call going deepers and practical perspectives. And by nature, being a faith-based organization, we add another module that's called the gospel and TBRI. And so we see a lot of parallels between the way that God approaches us in relationship, how he calls us to approach others in relationship, and the principles of TBRI. And so we draw those parallels in that module and really want to help churches and families know how to integrate their Christian faith with using this as a care model. So that's Hope for the Journey. And also under that, because we do believe in TBRI, we offer TBRI practitioner scholarships to help with the cost of going through that training. And we love especially to help ministry leaders and church leaders go through that training. That's pre and post adoption support. Our medical care grant, which is about 4 years old, is a resource that we now offer to help with expenses once the child has been brought home. So we all know oftentimes a child experiences pre-existing conditions when they come into our home. Sometimes it's something that develops later on, maybe years down the road. And so this is a resource that's available to families up until the child is 18. And it's just a way for us to continue to journey with families. And then the last resource is under our student initiatives, and currently it's called the Pause Campaign, which is a 7-day devotional that we love to send to student groups. And it helps them to pause from something, which is typically social media, YouTube, video games, something that is it's not inherently bad, but it can be distracting from the things that are really important. So we say, just turn down the volume on that for the next 7 days, and then really listen closely to what God tells us about his heart for orphans and vulnerable children, and then how he calls us to action. So Show Hope, you will often hear, was started in large part because of the Chapman's eldest daughter, Emily, when she was 11 years old. When she found out that there were children that did not have families, she said, "This should not be so. What is our family doing to invite children in?" And so she would say that she pestered her parents until they seriously considered and prayed about inviting children into their home. And so they eventually adopted 3 girls from China. And so the Chapmans and Show Hope over the past 20 years really believe in the power of students and their ability to affect change as students. We don't have to wait until they're adults. If we equip them and then just give them opportunity to run, oftentimes, like 1 Timothy 4 tells us, they can be examples to the rest of us in the church, and can really challenge us to step out and encourage and to serve others. So those are our resources to Show Hope that we love to share with families and with churches.
Yeah, I love all of those resources, and I know they can all be found at showhope.org, correct?
That's correct.
Yeah, and then I wanted to make sure I pointed out the Hope for the Journey, because it can be tongue-tied, because our support group for parents of raising kids with FASD is called Hope for the FASD Journey, which was a merging of my fellow adoptive mom who hosted her own podcast called FASD Hope, and my podcast is the Adoption and Foster Care Journey. We sort of mushed our names together and came up with Hope for the FASD Journey. Not to be confused with Hope for the Journey, which is the fabulous training that you guys provide online or digitally, that can be shown in churches for families, right? Because that's what I wanted to talk a little bit more, dial down a little bit on Hope for the Journey, because I know how impactful when it was Empowered to Connect, how impactful we went to the first one in person with Dr. Purvis, and then for a couple of years We hosted it at our church or a church in our area, so it means a whole lot to me, and I know how important that is. So for our listeners who are thinking, gosh, I wish I could bring that kind of training to a big screen in my church for all of the adoptive and foster parents that I know to attend, how does somebody get that going at their church?
Yeah, well, first, let me say something to those who maybe knew it as Empower to Connect conference. So, in those years, it was an in-person conference, and there was a simulcast option, which was then available for 3 months after the live person event. When we transitioned to Hope for the Journey in 2021, we kept that 3-month window. So it was typically available from April to June. And the biggest feedback that we received was, I love Hope for the Journey, but I can't do it then. Can I have it in September? Can I have it in December? Can I have it in January? And so just this year, we put Hope for the Journey on its own platform, hopeforthejourney.com, and it is now available year round. And so there's some different access options. People can still get a 3-month access pass if that's what they want. But any time of the year, they can choose when that 3 months is, or they can do a 12-month pass. So that's both for individuals. So somebody could just purchase it for individual access and their family could go through it at home at their own pace. Or organizations like churches can purchase access and they can show it to any number of people in their church as many times as they want during that access period. So it might be a foster care and adoption support group. It might be the children's ministry team. It might be the youth ministry team. It might be care communities. There's just a range of people that would benefit from watching the content.
Yeah, so then our listeners can go to hopeforthejourney.com. Is that correct?
That's correct. Mm-hmm.
Wonderful. And we'll make sure we put in the show notes links to both showhope.org and hopeforthejourney.com so our listeners can easily find that, because highly recommend that Hope for the Journey training, because it was impactful for my family. It was a game changer. Reading The Connected Child and then having that training, definitely life-saving for our family. So I want to make sure that we definitely mention that. So Justin, as we wrap up here, would you just share some words of encouragement to our foster and adoptive parents who are listening today?
Yeah, so I was thinking through this. What do I need to hear? What encouragement do I need? Because I'm very much still in the journey, and I'm actually going to point to a book and read a couple of quotes out of it, and then would just encourage your readers to either pick it up and read it or listen to it in audiobook style, because it's just incredibly encouraging. It was not written directly for foster and adoptive families, but it has just so directly impacted me that I would love for them to read it. So it's Dane Ortland's Gentle and Lowly. I don't know if you've read that book or if your readers have read that, but just a couple of quotes out of this to just really remember the heart of Jesus and how he approaches us. And this is the encouragement that we need, is when God thinks about me or when he looks on me, who does he see? What does he think about me? So 2 quotes here on page 54 of the book. He says, he does not handle us roughly. He doesn't scowl or scold. He doesn't lash out the way many of our parents did. And all this restraint on his part is not because he has a diluted view of our sinfulness. He knows our sinfulness far more deeply than we do. Indeed, we are aware of just the tip of the iceberg of our depravity, even in our most searching moments of self-knowledge. His restraint simply flows from his tender heart for his people. And then on page 57, actually page 63, he says, fallen anxious sinners are limitless in their capacity to perceive reasons for Jesus to cast them out. How often do our kids feel about our love for them? We are factories of fresh resistances to Christ's love. Even when we run out of tangible reasons to be cast out, such as specific sins or failures, we tend to retain a vague sense of that when given enough time, Jesus will finally grow tired of us and hold us at arm's length. And I'm just reminded when I read those passages, both of Jesus' unwavering love for me. He knows me more fully than I do myself. And he still says, no, I want you. You belong with me. And later on in the book, he talks about, let's look at your sin together and address it together, right? And I think about that with our children. It's not exact corollary, but our children have had very difficult experiences. And so instead of letting those experiences get between us, let's come alongside our children and say, yeah, let's look at this challenge together, and I'm with you. And that is never going to push me away from you. Mm-hmm. We're going to tackle that together as long as it takes, as many times as it takes. We're together. We belong together. And so I think we just need that reminder often that no matter how many times our kids may doubt our love for them, we keep loving them and keep showing them that in practical ways.
Yeah, I love that imagery of even in our mess, God doesn't keep us at arm's length, and our kids come with a lot of that mess, and we can't hold them at arm's length. We have to embrace them, right, and build that That's connection, right? So,
yeah.
Gosh, thanks so much, Justin, for sharing those words and sharing your story with us, and for all that you're doing through Show Hope and all that Show Hope is doing on behalf of the foster and adoption community. Thanks so much for being with us today.
Thank you, Sandra. I appreciate the opportunity.
And of course, thank you for listening to this episode today. I hope you were encouraged by my conversation with Justin Myers. Be sure to check out showhope.org and hopeforthejourney.com for those amazing resources for foster and adoptive families. They're vital and such great work that they are doing. And of course, we've got our resources on the Justice for Orphans NY.org website, where you'll find all of our adoption and foster care journey resources from this podcast, those special bonus episodes with Dr. Jared Brown, our support group, and all of the FASD training and my blog. All of that is there. I hope that you will check it out. And also you'll be able to see the upcoming trainings that will become available in the new year for all of our FASD training. We're not offering any of those courses because I do them live. We're not offering any of them in November or December, but we will start again in January. So you want to stay tuned for that, because I always do a free 1-hour intro to FASD online that people can sign up for, and really talk about the impact of prenatal exposure to alcohol, how it affects brain development, and how to take a brain-based approach to parenting. And then, of course, I have those deeper dive sessions from 3 hours up to 15 hours of content using the Facets neurobehavioral model. So stay tuned to our socials and to our website and to this podcast, so you'll know when any of those workshops that are available online will be coming up that you can register for, and find our socials. And of course, the video version of this podcast is available on the Justice for Orphans YouTube channel. So if you want to see snow behind me, because we got about an inch of snow last night, so it's super pretty. That's a real background. If you tune into our YouTube channel, you'll get to see the background that I have today, because it's beautiful up here in the mountains. Again, please be sure to share information about this podcast with your fellow adoptive and foster parent friends so that they can have these resources as well. And I'm grateful to have you along for the journey. Thanks again.
Thank you for listening to this episode of the Adoption and Foster Care Journey podcast, brought to you by Justice for Orphans. We hope you were encouraged today. Please be sure to subscribe to this podcast and leave a review, and share it with your fellow foster and adoptive parent friends so they can be encouraged too. Be sure to find and follow us on Facebook and Instagram at Justice for Orphans, and check out our website for vital resources at justicefororphansny.org.